Welcome to Empowering Voices, Advocacy in Action, the podcast that amplifies the voice of patients, advocates, and healthcare leaders driving change. Together, we'll explore stories, strategies, and solutions to empower you to make an impact. Let's turn advocacy into action, starting now.
Welcome today to Empowering Voices, brought to you by Heal Canada. Today we're interviewing and having a podcast with a longtime friend, Jenn M. And I'd like to preface our podcast today with patient advocacy is not just about advocating for people who have a sickness journey or a diagnosis journey. It also, as you can probably can see or have read in our E3 Advocacy magazine, we have a huge mental health section. And today I'll be talking with Jenn about some issues about mental health that she's personally experienced and has identified through her book calling The Truth Lies in the Mountain. So welcome, Jenn. I'm really happy to have you on our podcast today and happy that you're here.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for the invitation to the podcast. And I find it just so fitting that the first podcast that I'm ever doing and the first book that I've ever released, it's all happening under this banner of Heal, because that's really the essence of my journey too, is at some point we need to go from surviving to healing. And so I'm excited about our conversation today.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into it here. Let's talk. So your book's title, The Truth Lies in the Mountain, suggests both challenges and revelations. What was the moment or the experience that made you realize that you needed to write this story?
Yeah, like I say in the book too, the story really has just written itself. By deciding to share some very personal journal entries, and the poems that I've written over it's about 20 years, I know that I could never retell those experiences with that same tone, the level of emotion, and the amount of details that happened right in that moment. And so it was then trying to decide how to put them together. And the catalyst for that, for saying I'm going to write this book, really happened at the moment that I was heading back into court. It was around 2018. It's already 10 years that I had been in court. And I was facing another round of it again to ask for financial support for my oldest kid who was heading into college. And that was the catalyst, because I was a self-represented litigant, not because I wanted to take on that huge challenge of facing a judge by myself, but because I was out of money, out of time, and I just needed to get this done. And I thought it should be quite simple, but it never is, going into court. And so the two just kind of went hand in hand with me preparing affidavits and concise letters and other letters. I just started to write the book as a way to support me in finding out how I could condense my story so that I was heard better, and that I could be a better advocate for my family. So court was kind of that moment, and with that, also under the mindset that this had to stop already. Like, we couldn't keep doing this, and I needed to wrap it up. And by writing a book, it became a very concrete way to kind of say, I'm done. It's wrapped up. We're not writing anymore.
Exactly. To really package it, right? To package and process all that you've gone through. Absolutely. So you write openly about storms and emotional and physical and spiritual moments that you've had. Which storm was the most difficult for you to revisit during your writing process? And how did you care for yourself when doing so? And specifically, the mental health part of, your psyche, yourself. How did you care for your mental health, when you were revisiting all of these storms?
That's a great question. And the most difficult storm that I had to revisit when I was wrongfully arrested. So that's 15 years ago this week, actually. January of 2011, I was wrongfully arrested. And yeah, even now, right? Like it catches me every time to even say those words. It was completely unjust. And so when I would come up to that in the writing process, I would start to spiral usually. I mean, because one thing kind of leads to another. And I would just get so overcome with all the emotions, a lot of anger, a lot of sadness. My whole life changed after 3 nights in a remand center. And I would just have to put the writing away. And it could go away for months because I couldn't bring that back into my daily life. Plus, I was still going through so many other storms. I never had time to heal from January 2011. I was in court until 2022. So we never had a moment to really catch our breath. And so how do you care for yourself? And that's really why I want people to read the book too. And that is, at some point you have to find your purpose. You have to find your joy again. And for me, comedy really played into that, kind of who I am, but I really leaned into it by starting to take different classes like improv and stand-up comedy. And to remind myself I had to laugh. That
They say laughter is the best medicine, right? And even for a moment in time.
right, because it changes, so many things. On all levels of yourself, because if you continue to hold that anger, you will get sick. And I remember Cheryl actually must have been just a year after jail or so, and I was looking at a minor surgery, and I went in to go have this minor surgery done. But at the same time, I had some sort of a worksheet. I don't remember how it was given to me, but it was like the red flags of stress. There was like 100 characteristics or something. And then you kind of tallied it up to see what number you were at. Well, I was off the charts. Like the number didn't even exist. Have you ever gone to jail? Yes. Have you ever been divorced? Yes. Like everything. Kids with anxiety? Yes, 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 yes. So I read that and I made a decision to cancel the surgery because I was so afraid that if I had that kind of a surgery, it would expose me then to other illnesses. Something I've been very conscientious of over this time. And I wasn't going to get sick at the end of all of this, but it became very intentional.
Absolutely, because we know that, or at least my thinking is that when the mind is overtaxed and anxiety and trepidation and our mental health is overtaxed, then that manifests in physiological symptoms and issues. And then when you have physiological symptoms, then it goes to the mind. And so it's this circuit of this vicious circuit of back and forth and back, right?
Absolutely. That's exactly it. And once I became really aware of that what I was holding mentally, emotionally, carrying with me could make me physically sick, I just said, no way. I need to find a way to take care of myself.
And your mental health. Exactly.
Absolutely. Right? The hardest job you ever have to do. But yeah.
Well, talk to me a little bit about a lot of your readers that have read your book, see it as a guide for navigating grief and adversity. What can you tell us about some key messages that you would hope that your readers would carry with them after turning the last page?
Another great question, because there's so many things that go through your mind when you come to the point of saying, should I actually publish this? Should I actually share to be this vulnerable and share something so personal? But it is exactly what I said. And I started it at the beginning of the book, saying that I wanted people to know about my mantra that carried me through over all these years. And that is, storms to rainbows, that life is always going to be challenging. And this is my story, but I hope it opens up a conversation for other people. Whatever's happening in their life, we all have challenges, and they can be positive ones or negative ones, but we have to deal with them. And they've really been given to us as opportunities to test our humanity, our ability to grow as a person. And so, I want people to realize that there is a way through, and we have to learn, right? And I say it lots in there about, learning how to respond versus react. And that's really key for all of this. When you read my story, it's hard not even like for the reader not to have a reaction.
Absolutely. And I can tell you I did. I read your book. I sat down and I have to tell you, I read it in one reading. I sat down and I started it from start to finish. And it was that compelling that I just kept, not like, I don't want to say it was like a soap opera, but, it was that compelling that it kept me wanting me to read to the, okay, well, what happened next? And what happened next? And how did she deal with this? And how did, and then when I put it down, it was like, oh my, this was a journey. I think that it's important for the message, I think, of hope, that you can give to people through your story saying, you know what, there'll be challenges in your life. And I'm hoping I'm not putting words in, but this is what I took from reading your book, is that there will be challenges in your life, but there is always hope.
And I'm glad you said that, because not to give too much away, I do hope a few people will be curious enough to pick up the book, but it is what the last page is about. And we have to have that. For me, going through these days, unbelievable stress. And I would just wake up in the morning and go, oh, okay, I guess I get to try again. Yesterday was really, really terrible, but we've got a new one ahead of us. And off I'd go again, and it would fall apart, and we'd have a really terrible day again. And I would just say, okay, well, sun rises in the morning, let's go again.
And as the sun sets, put those issues to bed, not metaphorically, but, let them be gone, right? Let those issues that came through that day be gone, to face the next day.
That's right. And that's always the goal. The reality is I probably didn't breathe or sleep properly for the last 15 years. Well, more. And, now I'm learning how to do that. Now I'm finally, and you kind of think, and maybe this is the other part, I guess I haven't thought about this too much, but when people read this and realize how long this took, I want people to realize that that's real, that we don't get through grief overnight. We don't get through loss and betrayal overnight. And I got confused sometimes when people, even counselors, mental health counselors, would say to me, Jennifer, it's been 3 years. Why is it not done yet? Why can't you get through this? And I'm like, seriously? That's what you're saying to me? Like it was just a relentless amount of storms. And so that's why I had to turn inward, because not everybody understood how long this was going to take. We didn't have a map, but I want people to know that it's normal. If it takes you 15 years to breathe again, it's okay.
Exactly. And, and we're going to go through our own journeys, and we don't know what will trigger a mental health. I don't want to call it an episode, but a mental health reflection where that can send you back into a deep, dark place. We don't know, going through different areas of grief, different situations, what those triggers will be and how that post-traumatic stress can manifest again in the future because of a situation that happened in the past. You talk a little bit about rainbows in your book. What is that one rainbow moment that shifted your perspective, in your mental health and shifted you into saying, okay, I can get through my situation.
I want to share a story from 2013. So that's 2 years after jail. Things were as bad as they could be in 2013. You would think that jail was enough. The wrongful arrest was not enough. And I went through a lot more, including losing my kids in 2012 in a very shocking court decision that we won't get into here. But in 2013, I had the kids every other weekend. I didn't have a job anymore. I was working between part-time jobs, lost my house. And I was at rock bottom. And I rented a place in South Edmonton, a townhouse, and it was terrible. But I had no money. I needed a landlord just to take me on. And this is what I ended up with. And it was my kind of sign I've hit the bottom. And the reason, though, why I picked this one is because there was a wood-burning fireplace in the living room. And because I only had the kids every other weekend, we just turned it into a camping weekend. So they would come home, we'd get the sleeping bags out and all the camp stuff and set the fireplace up. And we just cuddle up. And that was our little happy place for the weekend. I was only there a few months. And I was in the midst of the second sewer backup, and I had had enough. And this lovely, charming older fellow from, I think it was Magic Cleaners, came in to clean up the sewage waste in the basement. And I went off on one of my rants, which I did a lot more before I condensed everything into the book. And I was just telling him how my life was kind of like the sewage waste in that basement. And then he started to chime in, and he had his own journey to share. And off we went, the two of us kind of back and forth. And then he paused and he said, you know what? He said, you're on the right track. He says, the universe has you. You're going to be okay. So he said, let's go over to Indigo Books because I want to buy some books for you. Books that help me, and I want you to have the same books. And I thought, okay, this is kind of strange, right? Like I'm going to go meet this stranger at the bookstore. But off I went, and he loaded me up, and I actually have most of them here because I packed them around with me. He loaded me up with a few of these books. And there was a couple I wanted. I think there was maybe about 10 books in all, over $100. Like I had no money at this time. And he said, no, it's on me. He paid for the books. And I got myself a coffee at Starbucks, and I sat down, and he said, okay, he says, you're going to be fine. Just remember that. And off he disappeared. And I was deeply moved. From that point, my perspective really shifted. And I just said, I need to trust. I need to trust this process, and I'll be fine. So
Absolutely.
yeah. And then it's part of the reason too why I said, I think I've always known I wanted to write a book because I just wanted to be in the mix.
You can say it's cathartic. You can say, whatever analogy you want to use. But really, what I have come to learn in advocacy is, when you're given a journey And, you never chose this journey. Just like when someone gets sick, or a diagnosis, you don't choose to be sick, because you don't go down the list and say, oh, I'll take that disease over that disease. Like we all get handed, I shouldn't say we all, but, in whatever case we get handed a diagnosis or a journey. It's really about how are we going to navigate that journey the best that we can, right? With the tools, with the people in our lives. It's about navigating that journey, navigating that what's been put in front of us.
Yeah, I love that word navigating because it's really that. And everybody's going to go a different way. It's all going to look a little bit different.
Exactly. And that's what advocacy is all about, is helping people navigate those journeys. In my opinion, that's what advocacy is, a huge part about helping people navigate those journeys.
That's right.
Giving them the resources, giving them the tools. This gentleman gave you the tools of the books to help you better navigate the journey that you were on, right? Talk to me a little bit about conveying the truth or conveying your message and your story, and why that resonates with mountains and rainbows.
Well, there is a bit of a personal one behind the word mountain, but we'll leave that one there. Let's look at the bigger framework with that. It's really been just who I am. I often say nature is like my church. I think my dad always said that too, right? We get out into the forest, into the bush to kind of meet our God or whoever that might be, our higher power. I was a farm girl. I've hiked many gravel roads in my younger days. In my 20s, my friends and I would do a lot of backcountry hiking and camping out in the mountains. We just felt a real deep sense of connection there, a place.
A serenity.
Yes, absolutely. And then I carried that into my family. The kids and I have always loved camping. And both of my kids, even in their young adult years, even got jobs with federal or provincial parks because they feel that sense of connection too with nature and that. And I just think it's who I am. It wasn't a decision about making that the framework. I just know that when I need to feel renewed or seek some guidance, it's usually a walk and get out in the trees. And all of that tells us so much about life in ways we don't even expect.
Absolutely. And just, the opportunity to clear our minds, to help think clearly. And some people might not have that ability to go into nature or into the mountains or, but even just going for a walk, just even that fresh, clean air to be able to help us think clearly, to be able to help us think through decisions, that we, have to make, that influx of oxygen into our bodies to help make those decisions can be very.
I'm glad you said that because it's the truth. You don't have to go far. It's in your backyard. When I was first separated in 2009, my world flipped upside down in ways that you can see in the book. And it was shocking. We never saw it coming. And my kids and I ended up in a rental home in South Edmonton. We were just lost. And I ended up in this rental home and I'm trying to explain it to my two tiny kids what was happening. And I had no idea. I didn't know if we were staying there for 1 month or 1 year. We had no idea. And so I said to the kids, this is our summer cottage. And we like to say it just like that. It's a cottage we're in. And so, because it was summertime. And so we just had that mentality, right? We embraced it as a cottage instead of going, we have to live in this crappy house because your dad and I divorced. Like, I didn't go there with my kids. I wanted them to still feel joy and to make this transition as graceful as possible, if you can imagine, especially after reading it. But we just shifted that mindset a bit. And so we were on a lake. We spent a lot of time on our bikes and in the trees and with the ducks, just watching ducks. So great.
Absolutely. Embracing that to help you navigate. Absolutely. So one last question I have for you, and I know this might be a tough one, but when people go through some sort of trauma, whether that's a physical diagnosis with a disease or a mental health issue because of a situation or a situation that they've been put in or a hardship, a lot of people will remain quiet, and they'll remain quiet for a lot of reasons, whether that's out of fear, perhaps shame, societal pressure. What advice would you offer to someone who's not yet able or ready to speak about their own storms? What guidance would you give someone?
Another reason why I wanted to write the book, and now what I have realized is becoming true, and that is my book might be the tool to be able to open up a conversation. And that can happen in lots of different ways. I had somebody recently say to me that they passed my book along to their daughter who is in a situation and needs to know right now that they are not alone. They might not be able to do any kind of other next steps, but it's a planting of a seed. It's to say, listen, somebody else went through this. Read this story. Maybe that'll help to navigate again what you need to do for your next steps. I really want people to know if they're not ready yet to share their own stories, in that my book could kind of be their voice too. I guess I have lots of thoughts with this one, really, because when I turn it back to myself and I say, there were so many times on this journey that my words got lost. Explaining it, I'm going to get right to a big word here that nobody likes to hear and it gets uncomfortable, but psychological violence is a thing. Psychological abuse is real. And in the years that I was going through the court system, it was not recognized. There was no consequences for it. It was like it didn't exist. And I didn't understand that until much later when I realized why some of the things I was requesting in court, I couldn't get help because court systems didn't have, the laws didn't have anything to help me. You had to be physically abused in order to be heard. A book like this or, other books that I did have along the way to help me to be able to say, listen, this is what's happening to me. You might not understand it because it's invisible. Two people can come across a certain way, but what happens behind closed doors can be very different. And the people can take this book and say, if you don't believe me, read this book. This can be the start of this, right? So it's just a voice. It's a, find the resources and the tools to say the words that you can't. I guess that's what I'm really coming down to.
Absolutely. It gives people that opportunity to, if they're not able to, for whatever reasons, really take their story or take their situation and say, okay, here it is. No, and that's advocacy groups. That's really, in my opinion, what patient advocacy groups are about is bringing people together who share a similar situation, whether that's a diagnosis, perhaps a situation like you were, put in, because then you don't feel so alone. And I think that's what your book does, is it creates that opportunity for people to say, I'm not the only one. And not to have that shame or fear to say, I'm not the only one going through a very similar situation. And so, there might not be an advocacy group or a program for people to come together, but your book at least gives them that opportunity to say, okay, I'm not the only one. and that there shouldn't be a shame or there shouldn't be a fear or a societal pressure to be able to stand up for myself or my rights or my situation. Jenn, this has been such a wonderful opportunity, to talk about your experiences and, really provide, as I say at Heal Canada, we hike. And it's funny because when you say you like to hike, but hope, inspiration, knowledge, and education. That's my acronym. And we hike for people, we provide them hope, we provide them inspiration, knowledge, and education to help them in whatever journey they're in and to help people advocate better, not only for themselves, but perhaps for their community. Because, it's really important that while our healthcare system is great, there are opportunities where people and issues fall through the cracks. And your story with the mental health issues that, were promulgated by the situation of your, that happened in your life, the mental health issues that your children went through because of the situation, thrust upon you and them, is seen as that then becomes a healthcare situation, right?
It really is. And the part that we haven't touched on, it's in the book, but the big part that was woven through all of this is the children's health. And neurodivergence is a big part in our lives, and we're learning about it more and more. But the more I tried to get help for my kids, the more I was denied it because we were under the banner of a high conflict divorce. So we were mislabeled, mistreated, denied counseling because we had a joint custody order. And so I couldn't get counseling for my kids when their dad disappeared because I needed 2 signatures. How was that fair, Cheryl? For 2 kids that needed that. And we have a lot of experiences in the halls of hospitals, counselors.
And our mental health, I think our mental health side of our healthcare system often takes a back door or a back seat to getting diagnosed, getting help, getting resources. It does because of this particular situations. And like you say, not misdiagnosed, but falling through the gap in that diagnosis, or also falling through the gap in what would be the best treatment option or treatments, or how do we, what's the word I'm looking for, but how do we address the psychological issues of children going through a very similar situation that you went through? Even yourself, how could you be a good parent, a good mom, if you had mental health, you had trepidation and you had, anxiety and all of those other things that come along with stressful situations in one's life. So yeah, our healthcare system, and hopefully Heal Canada, we can perhaps maybe in future opportunities work with you to address. Let's hope, maybe let's look at setting up a webinar, or let's hope we can work together in some form to help, in that mental health side, and really push that forward to give, to hike for people, that hope, inspiration, knowledge, and education.
I love that. I'm really happy to know about that. And I love acronyms. You'll see in the book too, head, heart, and gut is something I talk about a lot. And for me, that's a hug. Head, heart, gut. And hike and hug and these tangible things can make us feel like we're healing.
Absolutely. It really is about providing people with the resources and the tools that they can use in their journey. And that's what, Heal Canada, that's what we're about, is helping people live better lives. And thank you for joining us today. Once again, Jenn M. The Truth Lies in the Mountains. It's a wonderful, and like I said, I read it start to finish in one read, and it just kept bringing me further in and going, wow, the resiliency that you've shown, the fortitude, there would have been a lot of people who would have just, again, shame of, societal pressures, just pulled themselves under a carpet and just said, I'm not dealing with this. But you had your children and you had your own self-worth that you said, no, I am not going to just lie down and allow, these circumstances to walk all over me. And, I have the most admiration for you. And, folks, give this book a read. It's a wonderful, like I said, not a hard read. It's not like Pillars of the Earth or, a nonfiction book where, you're having to go back and forth and back. It's a very good read. It's a very visceral read. And it happens every day in our lives, not in everyone's life, but how you've pursued and overcome the mental health issues that became a result of this. Because just even your the incarceration that you faced, which wasn't warranted and which wasn't substantiated, or wrongful incarceration, that could have set you over the brink. And you've chosen resiliency, Jenn, and I have the highest admiration for you. So I'm hoping that we can, through this podcast, get other folks to read this book. We can perhaps look at some other opportunities to help in the mental health side of Heal Canada's mission, and how we can help people live better lives, and how we can hike for them. Hope, inspiration, knowledge, and education.
Love it.
So thank you so much for joining me today. This has been Heal Canada's Empowering Voices, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on Empowering Voices Advocacy in Action. Stay inspired, stay informed, and keep advocating for change. Together, we're stronger, amplifying our collective voice. Don't forget to subscribe and share. Your voice matters.